Judge Kavanaugh, Chief Justice John Roberts has recognized that, quote, the judicial branch is not immune, end quote, from the widespread problem of sexual harassment and assault, and has taken steps to address this issue. As part of my responsibility as a member of this committee to ensure the fitness of nominees for a lifetime appointment to the federal bench, I ask each nominee 2 questions. First question for you. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No.
I started asking these questions about sexual harassment because it's so hard to hold lifetime appointees to the federal bench accountable, and because I did not want the Me Too movement to be swept under the rug. While Senator Hatch asked you some questions about this, I have some additional questions for you. Last December, 15 brave women came forward and shared their stories of sexual harassment and assault by former Judge Alex Kozinski. Some of them are detailed on the chart behind me. Very explicit allegations of sexual harassment and assault. We know from the reporting that Judge Kozinski's behavior was egregious and pervasive. It went on for more than 30 years. It affected law clerks, professors, law students, lawyers, and in at least one case, even another federal judge. And those are just the women who came forward. Judge Kozinski's behavior became so notorious that professors began to warn female students not to apply for clerkships with them. Judge Kozinski's behavior in this regard was an open secret. A short time after Judge Kozinski's accusers went public, the judge abruptly resigned, which effectively shut down the federal investigation into his misconduct. I do not think this was a coincidence. In 2008, in connection with another investigation into Judge Kozinski, the LA Times wrote a story about something called the Easy Rider Gag List, an email group that the judge used to send what the Times reported was, quote, a steady diet of tasteless humor, end quote. The report describes the list as made up of friends and associates, including his law clerks, colleagues on the federal bench, prominent attorneys, and journalists. Senator Hatch asked you if you were on this Easy Rider gag list, where Judge Kozinski would send inappropriate materials. Your response was that you don't remember anything like that. Are you telling us that you may have received a steady diet of what people on the list have described as, quote, a lot of vulgar jokes, very dirty jokes, but you don't remember it?
No. I don't remember anything like that, and I'm not.
Oh, the answer is no. Have you ever?
If I could elaborate.
I think that's a complete answer. Let me go on. Have you otherwise ever received sexually suggestive or explicit emails from Judge Kozinski, even if you don't remember whether you were on this gag list or not?
So, Senator, let me start with no woman should be subjected to sexual harassment in the workplace. And
Judge Kavanaugh, you already went through all of that, and I will get to your perspective about making sure that women in the judiciary do not get sexual harassed. I just want to ask you, during and after your clerkship with Judge Kozinski, did you ever witness or hear of allegations of any inappropriate behavior or conduct that could be described as sexual harassment by Judge Kozinski?
No, Senator, and there were 10. I worked in Washington D.C. There were 10 judges in the courthouse with him in Pasadena. Prominent federal judges in the courthouse with him, and we worked side by side with him day after day while he was chief judge of the Ninth Circuit.
To be clear, while this kind of behavior on the part of Judge Kozinski was going on for 30 years, it was an open secret. You saw nothing, you heard nothing, and you obviously said nothing. Judge Kavanaugh, do you believe the women who recently came forward to accuse Judge Kozinski of this kind of behavior?
I have no reason not to believe him, Senator.
So let me just put this into a context, because you have testified that you basically saw no evidence of this kind of behavior at all. You never heard of it, but you worked closely with them on a number of projects. It wasn't just during the time you were clerking for him. You kept in touch with him while you were in the White House. He introduced you to the Senate at your 2006 nomination hearing, and he called you his good friend. Yesterday, you called each of the people who introduced you a friend, and I presume you felt that way about Judge Kozinski when he introduced you in 2006. You joined him for panels at the Federalist Society, where you patted him on the shoulder and said, "I learned from the master about hiring clerks." And I believe I have a photo of that. Here's Judge Kozinski. You told us that you have hired many women clerks, how you are a mentor to women, how important you think it is for women to have a safe working environment where they feel that they can report sexual harassment. I conclude that you consider yourself an advocate for women. If a judge was aware that another judge was engaging in sexual harassment or sexual assault, would the judge have a duty to report it?
Had I heard those allegations, Senator, I would have done three things immediately. I would have called Judge Tom Griffith, who's on our court, who's on the Codes of Conduct Committee for the Federal Judiciary appointed by Chief Justice Roberts. I would have called Chief Judge Garland, who's chair of the Executive Committee. I would have called Jim Duff, who's head of the Administrative Office of the U.S. Courts. If for any reason I was not satisfied with that, I would have called Chief Justice Roberts directly.
So you believe that all judges who, including yourself, if you ever heard or any allegations about these kinds of behaviors, you would report it, you would go through whatever processes were set up by the courts
I would
to
do that,
prevent this kind of behavior and to hold people accountable. And yet, someone that you've been close to, that you clerked, and I did go through the various encounters, more than encounters, that you had with Judge Kozinski, and yet you heard nothing, saw nothing, and obviously you did not say anything. So let me just mention that this is why the Me Too movement is so important, because often in these kinds of situations where there are power issues involved, and certainly there are between judges and clerks, that often, it's an environment where people see nothing, hear nothing, say nothing. And that's what we have to change.
I agree with you, Senator.
That's good.
I agree completely. There need to be better reporting mechanisms. Women who are the victims of sexual harassment need to know who they can call, when they can call. They need to know first that the way
Judge Kavanaugh, perhaps if all of those situations or those processes had been in place over the 30 years that Judge Kozinski was engaging in this kind of behavior, maybe he would have stopped, but he did not. I have one more question, Judge Kavanaugh. Were you aware of the serious allegations of domestic violence against Rob Porter before you recommended him for staff secretary to Donald Trump?
There's a premise in there that I'm not sure is accurate.
The premise being that he engaged in domestic abuse?
No, the recommendation premise. But put that aside. No, I was not aware of those allegations until they became public.